Hey everyone. Today is Wednesday, I think. Yeah. So we're gonna get started with another section of our read aloud. Yesterday we started chapter 7, didn't we? Yes. No. Yes, we are in the middle of chapter 7 right now. They had the little circus show, and then Emma convinced everyone to go swimming. So right now they are headed to go swimming, so they have to go through town to get there, and we'll see what happens today. Remember yesterday I said I kind of was having this feeling like something's gonna happen, so I'm wondering if something's gonna happen while they're swimming, or maybe after that. I don't know. I just feel like it's been like a couple read alouds of it being like just kind of normal, but I think the author had to do that because they had to give us a lot of information about these peculiar children. So it had to be a lot of description and a lot of them just hanging out at the house, so that way we could, as a reader, learn more about their life and their world. So, I mean, definitely the author did that for a reason, but I mean, in order for it to be a book that captures our attention, some crazy things have to happen. So it is fantasy, you never know. Let's see what happens today. I don't know. Alrighty. Share my screen. Let me make this bigger. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so right now they are going through town to get to the harbor. All right. When the laughter, oh, I gotta start my timer, you guys, because I don't want to just read forever and then just waste your whole day. Okay. When the laughter had died down, I pulled Emma aside and whispered, "What exactly is it that makes Horace peculiar? Aside from his clothes, I mean." Oh yeah, we haven't heard like what is his like peculiarity, like what's different about him. He has prophetic dreams. Gets these great nightmares every so often, which have a disturbing tendency to come true. Ooh, that sounds interesting. How often? A lot? Ask him yourself. But Horace was in no mood to entertain my question, so I filed it away for another time. As we came into town, I wrapped a towel around my waist and hung another from my shoulders. Though it wasn't exactly prophecy, Horace was right about one thing. Nobody recognized me. Walking down the main path, we got a few odd looks, but no one bothered us. We even passed the fat man who'd made such a stink over me in the bar. He was stuffing a pipe outside the tobacconist's shop and blathering on about politics to a woman who was barely listening. I couldn't help staring at him as we passed. He stared back without even a flicker of recognition. So remember, it's the same day. They live in the same day over and over again. So what happened yesterday actually hasn't happened yet because it's the same day. Whew, so hard to understand and grasp. Time travel, yeah, crazy. All right, where am I? It was like someone had set reset on the whole town. I kept noticing things I'd seen the day before, the same wagon rushing wildly down its path, its back wheel fishtailing in the gravel, the same woman lining up outside the well, a man tarring the bottom of a rowboat, no further along in his task than he'd been 24 hours ago. I almost expected to see my doppelganger sprinting across the town pursued by a mob, but I guess things didn't work that way. You guys must know a lot about what goes around here, I said, like yesterday with the planes and that cart. It's Millard who knows everything, said Hugh. It's true, said Millard. In fact, I am in the midst of compiling the world's first complete account of one day in the life of a town, as experienced by everyone in it. Every action, every conversation, every sound made by each of the 159 human and 332 animal residents of Cairnholm, minute by minute, sunup to sundown. That's incredible, I said. I can't help but agree, he said. In just 27 years, I've already observed half the animals and nearly all the humans. My mouth fell open. 27 years? He spent 3 years on pigs alone, Hugh said. That's all day, every day, for 3 years taking notes on pigs. Can you imagine? This one dropped a load of biscuits. That one said oink oink, and then went to sleep in its own filth. Notes are absolutely essential to the process, Millard explained patiently, but I can understand your jealousy, Hugh. It promises to be a work unprecedented in the history of academic scholarship. Oh, don't cock your nose, Emma said. It'll be unprecedented in the history of dull things. It'll be the dullest thing ever written. Rather than responding, Millard began pointing things out just before they happened. Miss Higgins is about to have a coughing fit, he'd say, and then a woman in the street would cough and hack until she was red in the face. Or, presently, a fisherman will lament the difficulty of plying his trade during wartime. And then a man, leaning on a cart filled with nets, would turn to another man and say, there's so many U-boats in the water now, it ain't even safe for a bloke to go tickle his own lines. I was dully impressed and told him so. I'm glad someone appreciates my work, he replied. We walked along the bustling harbor until the docks ran out, and then followed the rocky shore along the headlands to a sandy cove. We boys stripped onto our underwear, all except Horace, who would remove only his shoes and tie, while the girls disappeared to change into modest, old-school-looking bathing suits. Then we all swam. Bronwyn and Emma raced each other, while the rest of us paddled around. Once we'd exhausted ourselves, we climbed onto the sand and napped. When the sun was too hot, we fell back into the water, and when the chilly sea made us shiver, we crawled out again. And so it went until our shadows began to lengthen across the cove. We got to talking. They had a million questions for me, and far away from Miss Peregrine, I could answer them frankly. What was my world like? What did people eat, drink, wear? When would sickness and death be overcome by science? They lived in a splendor, but were starving for new faces and new stories. I told them whatever I could, racking my brain for nuggets of 20th century history from Miss Johnston's class. The moon landing, the Berlin Wall, Vietnam. They were hardly comprehensive. It was my time's technology and standard of living that amazed them most. Our houses were air-conditioned. They've heard of television but had never seen one, and were shocked to learn that my family had a talking picture box in almost every room. Air travel was as common and affordable to us as train travel was to them. Our army fought with remote-controlled drones. We carried telephone computers that fit in our pockets. And even though mine didn't work here, nothing electronic seemed to, I pulled it out just to show them its sleek mirrored enclosure. It was edging toward sunset when we finally started back. Emma stuck to me like glue, the back of her hand brushing mine as we walked. Passing an apple tree on the outskirts of town, she stopped to pick one. But even on tiptoes, the lowest fruit was out of reach, so I did what any gentleman would do and gave her a boost, wrapping my arms around her waist and trying not to groan as I lifted, her white arm outstretched, wet hair glinting in the sun. When I let her down, she gave me a little kiss on the cheek and handed me the apple. Here, she said, you earned it. The apple or the kiss? She laughed and ran off to catch up with the others. I didn't know what to call it, what was happening between us, but I liked it. It felt silly and fragile and good. I put the apple in my pocket and ran after her. When we came to the bog, I said I had to go home. She pretended to pout. At least let me escort you, she said. And so we waved goodbye to the others and crossed over to the cairn, me doing my best to memorize the placement of her feet as we went. When we got there, I said, come with me to the other side a minute. I shouldn't. I've got to get back or the bird will suspect us. Suspect us of what? She smiled coyly. Of something. Something? She's always on the lookout for something, she said, laughing. I changed tactics. Then why don't you come see me tomorrow instead? See you? Over there? Why not? Miss Peregrine won't be around to watch us. You could even meet my dad. We won't tell him who you are, obviously, and then maybe he'll ease up a little about where I'm going and what I'm doing all the time. Me hanging out with a girl? That's like his fondest dad dream wish. I thought she might smile at the girl thing, but instead she turned serious. The bird only allows us to go over for a few minutes at a time, just to keep the loop open, you know? So tell her that's what you're doing. She sighed. I want to, I do, but it's a bad idea. She's got you on a pretty short leash. You don't know what you're talking about, she said with a scowl, and thanks for comparing me to a dog. That was brilliant. I wondered how we'd gone from flirting to fighting so quickly. I didn't mean it like that. It's not that I wouldn't want to, she said. I just can't. Okay, I'll make you a deal. Forget coming for the whole day. Just come over for a minute, right now. 1 minute? What can we do in 1 minute? I grinned. You'd be surprised. Tell me, she said, pushing me. Take your picture. Her smile disappeared. I'm not exactly at my most fetching, she said doubtfully. No, you're great, really. Just 1 minute, promise? I let her go into the cairn first. When we came out again, the world was misty and cold, though thankfully the rain had stopped. I pulled out my phone and was happy to see that my theory was right. On this side of the loop, electronic things worked fine. Where's your camera? She said, shivering. Let's get this over with. I held up the phone and took her picture. She just shook her head as if nothing about my bizarre world could surprise her anymore. Then she dodged away, and I had to chase her around the cairn, both of us laughing. Emma ducking out of my view, only to pop up again and vamp for the camera. A minute later, I'd taken so many pictures that my phone had nearly run out of memory. Emma ran to the mouth of the cairn and blew me an air kiss. See you tomorrow, future boy. I lifted my hand to wave goodbye, and she ducked into the stone tunnel. So he got Emma to go onto his side in his world in his time, long enough for him to take a picture of her with his phone, because remember, his phone isn't working in her time period. But she's going back now. So he's in his time period. She just went back to hers. We're going to keep reading here past this break. I skipped back to town, freezing and wet and grinning. I was still blocks away from the pub when I heard a strange sound rising above the hum of the generators. Someone was calling my name. Uh-oh. Following the voice, I found my father standing in the street in a soggy sweater, breath pluming before him like a muffler exhaust on a cold morning. Jacob, I've been looking for you. You said be back by dinner, so here I am. Forget dinner, come with me. My father never skipped dinner. Something was most definitely amiss. What's going on? I'll explain on the way, he said, marching me toward the pub. Then he got a good look at me. You're all wet, he exclaimed. For God's sake, did you lose your other jacket too? And why is your face red? You look sunburned. Crap, a whole afternoon at the beach without sunblock? I'm all hot from running, I said, though the skin on my arms was pimpled from cold. What's happening? Did someone die or what? No, he said. Well, sort of, some sheep. What's that got to do with us? They think it was kids who did it, like a vandalism thing. They who? The sheep police? The farmers, he said. They've interrogated everyone under the age of 20. Naturally, they're pretty interested in where you've been all day. My stomach sank. I didn't exactly have a watertight cover story, and I raced to think of one as we approached the priest hole. Outside the pub, a small crowd was gathered around a quorum of very mad-looking sheep farmers. One wore muddy coveralls and leaned threateningly on a pitchfork. Another had Worm by the collar. Worm was dressed in neon track pants and a shirt that read, I love it when you call me Big Papa. That's interesting. He'd been crying, snot bubbling on his upper lip. A third farmer, rail thin and wearing a knit cap, pointed at me as we approached. Here he is, he called out. Where have you been off to, son? Dad patted me on the back. Tell them, he said confidently. I tried to sound like I had nothing to hide. I was exploring the other side of the island, the big house. Knitcap looked confused. Which big house? That wonky old heap in the forest, said Pitchfork. Only a certified stupid person would set foot in there. Place is witched and a death trap to boot. Knitcap squinted at me. In the house with who? Nobody, I said, and saw Dad gave me a funny look. Bullocks, I think you was with this one, said the man holding Worm. I never killed any sheep, cried Worm. Shut up, the man roared. Jake, said my dad, what about your friends? Crap, Dad. Knitcap turned and spat. Why, you little liar, I ought to belt you right here in front of God and everybody. You stay away from him, my father said, doing his best stern dad voice. Knitcap swore and took a step toward him, and he and my dad squared off. Before either could throw a punch, a familiar voice said, Hang on, Dennis, we'll get this sorted. And Martin stepped out of the crowd to wedge himself between them. Just start by telling us whatever your boy told you, he said to my father. Dad glared at me. He said he was going to see friends on the other side. What friends? Pitchfork demanded. I could see this was only going to get uglier unless I did something drastic. Obviously, I couldn't tell them about the children, not that they'd believe me anyways, so instead I took a calculated risk. It wasn't anybody, I said, dropping my eyes in feigned shame. They're imaginary. What'd he say? He said his friends were imaginary, my dad repeated, sounding worried. The farmers exchanged baffled glances. See, Worm said, a flicker of hope on his face. Kid's a bloody psycho. It had to be him. I never touched them, I said, though no one was really listening. It weren't the Americans, said the father who had Worm. He gave Worm's shirt a retch. This one here, he's got a history. A few years back, I watched him kick a lamb down a cliffside. Wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. After he'd done it, I asked him why. To see if it could fly, he says. He's a sickie, all right. People muttered in disgust. Worm looked uncomfortable, but didn't dispute the story. Where's his fishmongering mate, said Pitchfork. If this one was in on it, you can bet the other one was too. Someone said they'd seen Dylan by the harbor, and a posse was dispatched to collect him. What about a wolf? Or a wild dog, my dad said. My father was killed by dogs. Only dogs on Cairnholm are sheepdogs, replied Knitcap, and it ain't exactly a sheepdog's nature to go about killing sheep. I wish my father would give it up and just leave, while the leaving was good. But he was on the case like Sherlock Holmes. Just how many sheep are we talking about? He said. 5, replied the fourth farmer, a short, sour-faced man who hadn't spoken until then. All mine, killed right in their pens. Poor devils never even had a chance to run. Oh, my feet are falling asleep. I'm sitting on the ground. 5 sheep. How much blood do you think is in 5 sheep? A right tubful, I shouldn't wonder, said Pitchfork. So wouldn't whoever did this be covered in it? The farmers looked at one another. They looked at me, and then at Worm. Then they shrugged and scratched their heads. Reckon it could have been foxes, said Knitcap. A whole pack of foxes, maybe, said Pitchfork doubtfully, if the island's even got that many. I still say that the cuts are too clean, said the one holding Worm. Had to have been done with a knife. I just don't believe it, my dad replied. Then come see for yourself, said Knitcap. So as the crowd began to disperse, a small group of us followed the farmers out to the scene of the crime. We trudged over a low rise, through a nearby field, to a little brown shed with a rectangular animal pen beyond it. We approached tentatively and peeked through the fence slats. The violence inside was almost cartoonish, like the work of some mad impressionist who painted only in red. The tramped grass was bathed in blood, where the pen's weathered posts and the stiff white bodies of sheep themselves flung about in attitudes of sheepish agony. One had tried to climb the fence and got its spindly legs caught between the slats. It hung before me at an odd angle. Legs clam-shelled open from throat to crotch, as if it had been unzipped. Oh my goodness. I had to turn away. Others muttered and shook their heads, and someone let out a low whistle. Worm gagged and began to cry, which was seen as a tacit admission of guilt. The criminal who couldn't face his own crime. He was led away to be locked in Martin's museum, in what used to be the sacristy, and was now the island's makeshift jail cell. I'm gonna have to look up that word. Until he could be reprimanded to police on the mainland. We left the farmer to ponder his slain sheep and went back to town, plodding across wet hills and in the slate-gray dust. Back in the room, I knew I was in for a stern dad talking to, so I did my best to disarm him before he could start in on me. I lied to you, Dad, and I'm sorry. Yeah, he said sarcastically, trading his wet sweater for a dry one. That's big of you. Now which lie are we talking about? I can hardly keep track. The one about meeting friends. There aren't any other kids on the island. I made it up because I didn't want you to worry about me being alone over there. Well, I do worry, even if your doctor tells me not to. I know you do. So what about these imaginary friends? Does Golan know about this? I shook my head. That was a lie, too. I just had to get those guys off my back. Dad folded his arms, not sure what to believe. Really? Better to have them think I'm a little eccentric than a sheep killer, right? I took a seat at the table. Dad looked down at me for a long moment, and I wasn't sure if he trusted me or not. Then he went to the sink and splashed water on his face. When he'd toweled off and turned around again, he seemed to have decided it was a lot less trouble to trust me. You sure we don't need to call Dr. Golan again? He asked. Have a nice long talk? If you want to, but I'm okay. This is exactly why I didn't want you hanging out with those rapper guys, he said, because he needed to close with something sufficiently parental for it to count as a proper talking to. You were right about them, Dad, I said, though secretly I couldn't believe either of them was capable of it. Worm and Dylan talked tough, but that was all. Dad sat across from me. He looked tired. I'd still like to know how someone manages to get a sunburn on a day like this. Right, a sunburn. Guess I'm pretty sensitive, I said. You can say that again, he said dryly. He let me go, and I went to take a shower and thought about Emma. Then I brushed my teeth and thought about Emma, and washed my face and thought about Emma. After that, I went to my room and took the apple she'd given me out of my pocket and set it on the nightstand. And then, as if to reassure myself she still existed, I got out my phone and looked through the pictures of her I'd taken that afternoon. I was still looking when I heard my father go to bed in the next room. And I was still looking when the Jennies kicked off and my lamp went out. And when there was no light anywhere but her face on my little screen, I lay there in the dark, still looking. Aww. That's the end of chapter 7. I'm glad we were able to finish a chapter today. That's nice to not have to stop in the middle of a chapter. Okay, so I think that my prediction was kind of right, although nothing really came about it. So I was predicting that something kind of weird was going to happen just because it felt like not a lot of like fantasy or crazy things had happened in a while. And so the only thing that we know right now is that a bunch of sheep were killed on the island. I mean, like brutally killed on the island. The islanders, all of the people who live there think that it was worm, although Jacob is saying he doesn't think it was worm because he thinks that they're just like all talk and they wouldn't actually do something like that. So worm is being taken into the museum right now, into their makeshift jail cell until the next day when they can take him to the mainland, because this island is so small it doesn't really have a jail or anything like that. So I don't know if it was worm. I can't really see him doing that. I kind of agree with Jacob. I think that he's like all talk and he wouldn't actually do something like that. It seemed, even though it did say that he did kick a sheep off a cliff one time, but the scene that they described seemed like really gory, and I just don't know if that's something that Worm would be able to do, especially when he started crying when he saw it. Like, he was clearly upset about it. So I don't know. I don't know who it could have been. I don't know. Maybe we're getting onto something, or maybe this was just an event that really doesn't mean anything. I don't know. But maybe something will come of this. We'll kind of have to see tomorrow, okay? So be thinking about it tonight. Be thinking about who could it be? Could this have anything to do with a bigger picture? Like, is this going to be a main part of the story, or was it just like something small that happened? I don't know. Be thinking about it tonight, okay? And we'll find out what happens in the beginning of chapter 8 tomorrow. Okay? Bye-bye, guys.